Hi everyone, and welcome to another Facebook Live Monday on this Memorial Day 2018. Before we get started today, I just want to acknowledge if anyone out there or if you out there are grieving somebody who served us in the military, or you come from a lineage of folks who served in the military and either died as a result of that service, were injured, had their lives permanently changed forever as a result of that, or just come from a history of being really entrenched in service to the United States, just holding space for and honoring that today. I don't do a lot of talk about the military on coming back because I have, feelings about war and getting into international conflict that don't always coincide with the desire to serve. But I do acknowledge always in grief that war, that service to our country, that identity and alignment with the military is something that changes our lives forever. So if you are grieving somebody that you lost on this Memorial Day and you're not doing the barbecues or the picnics or going to the beach or kind of the things that normal not grieving people tend to do on Memorial Day, I just want to acknowledge that for you today. If you are missing a loved one who you have lost who has served in the military. So today we're going to be talking about a different kind of grief, and that is grief for the jerks and the assholes and the abusers and the toxic people and the estranged parents and the people who abandoned us and did not treat us very kindly. Today we're talking about grieving people who are wrong for us. And there's kind of this inherent belief in society that if we're grieving, we must be grieving something that we miss, or we must be grieving something that we loved at one point or another, or we must be grieving something that it is heartbreaking to see leave our lives. And that's not always the case with jerks, with toxic people, with assholes, with abusers, with, relationships with people that didn't work out. Sometimes we grieve people that we are not meant to continue doing life with. And that's a different kind of grief because there's almost like a shame involved here of I shouldn't be grieving them because I should be celebrating the fact that they're no longer in my life. I shouldn't be grieving because, I should be wiping my hands and saying good riddance and be proud to never see them again, or proud to have kicked them out of my life, or proud to be, freewheeling and taking steps to have been on my own now. So there's a lot of conflict that can come in, and a lot of shame and a lot of isolation that can come in when grieving somebody that was not good for us, that was wrong for us, that wasn't the right fit, that was harmful to us, or even toxic to us in our lives. And this all came up as a result of the podcast this week. I talked to Sunny Joy McMillan, who's a radio host over at, I believe it's 1150 KKNW over in Seattle. She hosts a spirituality radio show called Sunny in Seattle. But beyond that, she's also a life coach who helps people get unstuck within their marriages. Her biggest loss thus far in her life has been a divorce. And while she doesn't help people get divorced, she consciously helps people get out of sticky spots in relationships. That doesn't always end in divorce. But her biggest loss was divorce from a person who she described as being like fire and like kerosene. So they were always like this with each other. And after the divorce, the 3 years after that were phenomenal, and she was putting her life back together and deciding who she was as a person. And 3 years later, that grief just like steamrolled through and hit her like a train. And it was surprising to her to have grief kind of show up, I guess, so late in the game, and to be grieving a partner who was not good for her, because 3 years later she was in a new relationship with the person she's currently in a relationship with now. It's a phenomenal relationship. They grow and they help each other grow. And so to be grieving this person who really inherently was not good for her, and a life that did not align with who she was really kind of shocking and surprising. And that's a big theme of what we talked about on the podcast this week, is your grief is not based on whether or not society deems the person that you're grieving as good. And this is like a big thing to comprehend, because society so many times, grieves the people who won awards, grieves the people who sacrificed for things, especially on this Memorial Day, grieves the people who were kind to their families and gave to their children and were present as humans, as parents, as children, as coworkers, as friends, as partners should be. Society kind of puts, losing good people up on a pedestal, quote unquote good people. But what happens when we lose the people who maybe weren't so good to us? And this is what Sunny and I talked about a lot this week, is that you have permission, you are allowed to grieve somebody who was wrong for you. And this is really vital. And I brought in, once again, I always love to bring in grief recovery definitions in this, and I brought in the grief recovery definition of grief explicitly, which is not grief is having something you love or someone you love torn away and the heartbreak that ensues. The definition of grief is basically all of the collections of emotions that come up when you have the end of or the change in your normal pattern of behavior. So what is normal? Your day-to-day life is normal. What you know to be true is normal. And when that ends or when that changes, that incites grief. That stirs up grief emotions within you, whether that's sadness, whether that's good riddance, whether it's nostalgia, whether it's relief, whether it's terror, whether it's fear, whether it's gratitude. However it pans out, that collection of emotions is all grief. But notice that there's no sway here. There's no disclaimer that grief is caused by losing someone or something that you really loved, or someone or something that was a valuable component to your life, or someone or something that was good for you or helped you grow or made you a better person. No, we are allowed to grieve the assholes. And that's like the biggest message I want to get across today, is you are allowed to grieve people who have been jerks to you, who've done you wrong, who have not been good influences in your life, who may have abandoned you, who've left you behind, who've treated other people better than you, or just simply didn't exist in your life in the way that they shouldn't have existed. And there's so much validity and permission being granted and being able to grieve people who were not kind. And so I guess when it comes to talking to others about this, because this is something that a lot of people struggle with, it really helps to define grief for them. The definition of grief is not losing something, that was super valuable or super good, in your life. But grieving is based on what has changed, what is different, what do you now have to adjust to that you can never go back to, the before and after moments. And remind people that no matter how your loss happened, whether it's through a divorce, whether it's through a death, whether it's through a job change or a move, or however it pans out for you, you now permanently have to adjust to this new life. Yes, it may be a better life. Yes, you may be like Sunny, where you're more aligned and clear. She uses the word clarity a lot on the show this week. And you might be more in your truth in this new life. But that does not mean that because the old life was not good for you, that you are not allowed to grieve now what has gone before. Because no matter what, these little foundational building blocks, these old lives that we shed in becoming the new people that we are, I'm getting chills as I'm saying this, these old lives are all worthy of grieving. These old partnerships, these old contracts, these old stories, they're all very worth grieving, even if they weren't serving us, even if they weren't good for us, even if they hurt us. They are worth grieving. Yeah. Just want to leave you with that today, because I think this is really powerful and really cool. And yeah, you have permission to grieve the assholes. You have permission to grieve the people that left. You have permission to grieve the people that hurt you, who cut you down, who backstabbed you, who hurt you. You have that allowance. And that's another part of grief. We're widening this definition, widening this circle of what grief is. And your grief for the assholes is absolutely welcome. So thank you so much for joining me this afternoon for this little Facebook Live video. As always, I will be posting this, cross-posting over on YouTube. If you'd like to share with your friends, you can also share here on Facebook. I would absolutely love if any of you watching right now were members of the Grief Growers Garden. This is my private Facebook group. We're doing a couple Memorial Day posts today. We always honor the people we love in there. We share photos and stories. We ask questions of each other. There's really fascinating conversations like what to do with cremains and, how to honor people that we lost through workplace tragedy. So it's really interesting and such a fun and kind of enlightened, a grief-enlightened group to be with. So if you're looking for a place to comfortably set down your pain, it's a good outlet. It's a good little community that we're working on building and continuing to nourish there. It is my garden. And then, of course, I will be back at you next Monday at 1 o'clock Central Time for another of these phenomenal Facebook Live videos. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I'll see you next week.